a place where we can go, lay the troubles down, eating your soul. I know a place where mercy flows, take the stains, make it whiter than snow. When the tide is rising up deep inside a current that moves and makes you come alive, living water that brings the dead to life. We're going down to the river, down to the river, down to the river to pray. Let's get washed by the water, washed by the water, rise up in amazing grace. Let's go down, down, down to the river. You will be changed. Let's go down, down, down to the river. Never the same. Let's go down. Let's go down, down, down to the river, never the same. Let's go down. Amen. Good morning, good evening, and welcome to church. What an amazing way to start worship, knowing that we can go down to the river and be washed by the water and rise up and walk with our living God. That who we were yesterday does not have to be who we are today, because He is here and He is with us. So if you are able, will you stand with us and let us worship Jesus? There is a shaking, let hearts awaken. Our God is moving, forever changing us. There is a trembling, there is revival, the sound of worship, so great and glorious. Holy Spirit, hear us now. Breathe on us, holy fire fall. Come and
Well, I decided that we're going to do 6 weeks of Isaiah. Okay? 10 chapters, a roll, give or take a chapter. It's only 66 chapters, so who knows how we're going to split it up. But before you go, oh, no, not the Old Testament, you need to know that Isaiah is considered the greatest prophet. He served from 742 to 686 BC. He is the prophet of Jesus Christ. He talks about the birth of Jesus Christ. He talks the forerunner, John the Baptist. He talks about the death and purpose of Jesus Christ. He talks about the ministry of Jesus Christ. And this is 700 years before Jesus Christ. All right? Paul quotes Isaiah 80 times. 80 times. And when Jesus called Paul on the Damascus Road, he quoted 2 Isaiah verses. Okay? Might not be aware of that. He's a guy that is speaking to Israel when major international news is taking place. The Assyrians, the third most violent people that ever lived, are rolling through the land. They're going to be taken over by the Babylonians. And Isaiah gets them ready for that. And then Isaiah talks about the Persians who are coming after the Babylonians. So we got a lot of things taking place of big magnitude in Isaiah. His contemporaries were Hosea and Micah. All right? And let's see. He died by the hands of Manasseh. He was sawed in half. Okay? Who'd saw an old prophet in half? Manasseh. Satan worshiper who gets saved at the end of his life. Satan worshiping for 50 years, did so much killing that the streets of Israel were red with blood. And how does God deal with it? Saves them. So just in case you're one of those people who says, oh, I've sinned too much, got some good news for you. I don't think you hit the Manasseh level. I hope not. Okay? And even if you did, he'd save you. One more thing before we dive in. Isaiah's name actually means salvation of the Lord. And deliverance is the main theme of the book. He talks about deliverance from the Assyrians. He talks about deliverance from Babylonian. He talks about the Jews who are going to get dispersed all over the world and be delivered from that separation. He talks about sinners at the judgment being delivered from the wrath of God. He talks about creation being restored from the bondage of sin. So Isaiah has a lot of nice things to say. But here's the problem with Isaiah. Most prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they start about the book off by talking about how they were called to the ministry. Isaiah jumps right on in, and he starts with a rather uncomfortable set of sermons. Okay? You think that I can have some bad sermons? Well, I learned from Isaiah. You remember those campaign billboards where it was all about, this is God. Let's meet at my house on Sunday before the game. God. Come on over and bring the kids. God. Need a marriage counselor? I'm available. God. We need to talk. God. Love the wedding? Invite me to the marriage. God. Love their neighbor? I meant that. God. Okay? Well, there's a whole bunch of good ones, right? And then there were some other ones. My way or the highway. God. Some things are written in stone. God. You think it's hot here? God. Keep using my name in vain and I'm going to make rush hour longer. God. Have you read my bestseller? There will be a test. God. Well, one pastor didn't like that, so he went on the radio and denounced. This is a pastor denouncing the billboards because it talked about these harsh statements regarding God. And there's a common statement.
You know, I don't like the God of the Old Testament.
I like the God of the New Testament. Okay? And I believe that I'm going to be able to dispel that just by talking about Isaiah. All right? And it's kind of interesting because Isaiah starts off almost with a courtroom setting. Don't you imagine the pearly gates? It's almost,
Why should we let you in?
okay, this is what's happening right here, right now. It's a courtroom where God brings up, listen, this is what I have against you. And he starts complaining about his people. He says, your sons that I have reared up, and they've revolted against me. You're like an ox that doesn't know its owner, a donkey that doesn't know its master. Notice, he talks to his people as if they're his children and his pets. Okay? Not bad. He says, Israel does not know, my people do not understand. And then in verse 5, he says, they're stricken, they're sick, they're faint, they have bruises and welts, they have raw wounds, there's nobody to fix them. Because, friends, this is what happens when you live life your way instead of God's way. Things get downright horrible in your life. He talks about the land is desolate. It's all burned up. You got a bunch of strangers taking over your lives. And lots of stuff that God is wanting to say to his people personally and his people who together as his people. Okay? That's the thing about the Bible. It's got a personal edge. It talks to all of his people. It has a universal component. It speaks to nations. Lots of dimensions when you open up the Bible. And here's what's sad about the opening chapter of Isaiah. He says, when you come to appear before me, who requires of you this trampling of my courts? You bring worthless offerings. I don't want them any longer. Don't light the incense for me any longer. I don't like your assemblies. I don't like your holidays. I can't endure your sins and I'm weary, I'm burdened of you. In other words, these are his religious people. Ouch. Suddenly, the Bible's talking about us. I know what you're thinking. It's talking about you, Pastor, not me, okay? You see, they're worshiping God on Thursday nights,
And they're partying on Friday nights.
they have the dual life, which sadly I think Americans have perfected. And he says, you're going to spread out your hands to me in prayer. This is verse 15. I'm going to hide my eyes from you. You're going to multiply your prayers. I'm not going to listen to you. Okay? And now you have to understand something. God listens. But he's frustrated. And here's what happens. When you allow sin to exist in your life, you minimize what he can do within you and around you. Are you still saved and going to heaven? Probably. I base that off of 1 Corinthians chapter 3. But you minimize what God is going to do in your life. And that's why he says, wash your hands, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from my sight, cease to do evil, learn to do good. And we say, well, I don't do evil. Well, let's think about those horrible thoughts you had about those people you don't like. Let's think about the opportunities to bless the poor that you didn't bother with. Let's think about the selfish acts that we so easily, casually engage in. Here's the bad news. God calls that evil. He's got a different standard than we do. You know, it's like the little boy who measured himself and said, I'm 6 feet tall. His mom said, prove it. He had the wrong ruler. By his standard, he was 6 feet tall. By the one that matters, he was tiny tot. And sometimes we're measuring ourselves according to, well, I think this is pretty good. I'm not as bad. I'm no Charles Manson. Well, praise God. You know, you're not a serial killer. That's a good start. But God has a higher calling for you than that. And here's where it's powerful. In verse 118, come now and let us reason together. The problem with our reasoning is this. We are slaves of our own self-logic. Our emotional needs, our cravings, our impulses, our self-esteem issues, they impact our reasoning process. You know, I was having lunch with somebody today, and we were trying to figure out why somebody acts the way they do and somebody else doesn't. And I say, because the one person sees the world through the self. And when you see the world through the self, it's all about what's in it for you. Everybody's a commodity. You measure things in terms of, are you happy? And that's a hard way to live, because happiness is one of those things that it keeps moving. It never just stays there. And God's saying, let my wisdom, let my lifestyle, let common sense according to the way I think dictate this conversation. And this mean God who's saying all this stuff, you want to hear what he has to say? Though your sins are as scarlet, they will be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they will be like wool. Right off the bat, what is he telling us? I'll forgive you. Okay? And you're going to find this is the pattern over and over again. I'm frustrated. You've got to change your evil ways. And by the way, I love you. I'll wipe that sin away from you. Let's get a fresh start together. That's what he wants. But, you know, if you think that God's being a little rough, in verse 21, they're murderers, they're partiers, they're thieves, they take bribes. In other words, they pervert justice this way. I mean, they're committing some serious sins, all right? They're chasing after rewards. Now materialism's getting in the way. I read something real important today, and I want you to hear me. Actually, let me go here first. He says, you don't defend the orphan, you don't take care of the widows, okay? You don't take care of those who are downtrodden and need help. This is important. And I'm just going to ask you, do you have on your checkbook or on your calendar or on your prayer list the needs of the broken, the homeless, the poor, the disenfranchised, those who are victims of injustice? Anybody like that on your prayer list? Or does a check go that way? I was with another person today. They're healing lepers. Okay? I forgot that we even had lepers. They send a significant amount of money to heal lepers. Okay? That's that person's thing. Somebody else helps out on 192. Somebody else is trying to fight human trafficking. Somebody else is taking care of that widow down the street. What are we all doing? Because it's supposed to be doing something. This is going to be a theme that's all the time. It's already happening 2 times in chapter 1 of Isaiah. Okay? Well, let's move to chapter 2. It gets big. He's talking personally. Now we're going to talk about his universal reign, where all the nations are going to stream to this mountain of his in the last days. Many people will come and say, let us go to the mountain of God, that he may teach us concerning his ways, that we may walk in his paths. And this is how he sums it up. They'll hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. ISIS won't happen anymore. There won't be any more Nazis or Soviets or Marines. It's all going to be over with when God gets done with this sinful earth. It's going to be time for us to care about one another, love one another, be concerned for one another, do all we can to bless one another. I think it's interesting in chapter 2, verse 6, he says, you're filled with the influences of the East. And I'm going to bring this up because I got lots of Christian friends who are into the New Age. Okay? Remember, I go to the hospital room. Hey, I've come to pray for you. I'm glad you're here because I got my crystal and I've been lighting up my tea leaves. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, you're not supposed to light anything in your room. The gas tank's right there. And it's Jesus, man. He's the healer. He's the source of life. What are you doing with the crystal? Hey, man, if you pass away, can I have that crystal? Because I think it would look good around my neck, you know? I'd love to smash it when you die. And, it's God. He wants us concerned about Him. There any alternative to the truth is a problem. And here's what's amazing. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was all about the crystals in the East. You know, the fastest growing religion right now is Islam. And I find it interesting. I'm not attacking Islam, but it's interesting that it's a rule-based, loveless God that you try to earn your way to. Then maybe He likes you, maybe He doesn't. You'll never know until eternity happens. You can only assure yourself of that if you kill somebody, doesn't know Him. People are attracted to that religion. Instead of a God who says, man, you're making mistakes, I love you, let me get into your life and pull out all the violence, all the negativity, all the hatred, and fill you with compassion and peace and joy and love. That's how messed up this world is. Why would we choose that over what God offers? It's called the sinful nature. Okay? That's the problem. And so God says you're going to have some problems. It's funny, in chapter 2, verse 10, this is Jesus talking about the end times. Remember when He said, go hide behind the rocks in Luke? Because the terror of the end times is coming your way? Right here. He's quoting Isaiah. A day of reckoning is going to happen. I want you to hear me. This is important. Reckoning is coming. You reap what you sow. You do bad, you get bad, unless you accept God's grace. Once you step into God's grace, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you don't deserve. His unmerited favor. Okay? Because He loves everybody. He loves all these guys who are bad. I'll never forget when Edom was real mean to Israel and they were going to get slaughtered, and I think they did get slaughtered, and God says, give me some time to grieve my Edomites. Well, wait, I thought they were your enemies. No, all souls are mine, and He cares about them. Interesting, in chapter 2, verse 17, He's talking about the pride of man will be humbled. And friends, this is sin, the pride of man. It's our independence. The root of sin. You know, Satan's specialty is autonomy. You don't need a God telling you what to do. I'd rather be in charge of my own life, and we all feel that way, and we make a mess out of our lives, and then we go running to God. Hey, will you help me out? Had this really interesting experience that this guy got cancer, and he died, and he said to his daughter, I'd like to call on God, but I haven't paid any attention to Him all my life. I can't go calling on Him now. And she said, well, you know what? You know how we've been separated all these decades, and now we're together? It's just like that. Just as you and I have a fresh new relationship, you can have a fresh new relationship with God. I thought it was the coolest illustration of how God operates. Doesn't matter how much baggage has gotten in between you and God, how long you've drifted. All you do is you turn to Him. He's interested in saving your soul. All right? The problem is we want to do it our way. And powerful verse. You know, I got to teach a preaching class in Princeton one semester. I thought I was the man, okay? Professor Lewis. And I shared with my professor this passage from Isaiah, and he put it up on the wall. Isaiah
2:22, stop regarding man whose breath of life is in his nostrils, for why should he be esteemed? You know, we worry so much about what people are going to say or what people are going to think. Friends, you just got to worry about what God says. Okay? And he's going to take care of you. He's going to guide you through whatever it is. He's for you. He likes you. And it's amazing how he can move international stages if we're willing to pray for him to do so, which we're going to see happen in a few minutes here. Okay? Well, chapter 3, he talks about, in verse 15, grinding the face of the poor. Okay? One more time. You and I, we have some responsibility for those who are economically underprivileged. Yes, they might have mismanaged their lives. Maybe they just came from a bad environment and they never had the tools to manage their lives. Maybe they made some mistakes and whatever happened, God doesn't care. He wants you and me to do something for them. He wants you and me to have accountability, responsibility, and when you and I don't do anything, we're grinding the face of the poor. Then he beats up on the women because, you know, the women, they have their headbands and crescent ornaments and anklets and earrings and bracelets and veils and headdresses and perfume boxes and finger rings and nose rings. And I was getting my wife a gift for Christmas. And there were these little things. I go, hey, what are these? Those are nose rings. Like, oh, you want me to get divorced and buy one of those, you know? I never figured out how they blow their nose, but we won't go there. See, these women, they have all this outer emphasis, just like we do. And God's saying, all that is putrefaction to me. You know, I read Thomas Aquinas today, and he said, let temporal things serve your use, but the eternal be the object of your desire. It's cool to have these temporal things. Put on your cool ring and your fun scarf and your new shoes or whatever it is. But that's not what we're supposed to live for. That's not what defines us. What defines us is the eternal being the object of our desire. And the eternal, talking about God, He's eternal. Well, one of the themes in Isaiah in chapter 4 is he talks about a remnant. Okay? The Assyrians are going to come, wipe away the 10 tribes of Israel. The Babylonians are going to take them, the people left in Judah, and the remnant's going to come back. All right? Revelations talks about the remnant. You got to know something. This is what the remnant means. God never loses his battles. Doesn't matter how bad it gets. Remember when Elijah said, man, I'm the only one left? And he goes, you kidding? I got 7,000 that haven't bent the knee to Baal. He's got his own little group of people. Wouldn't you like to be counted in the 7,000 if you lived back then? Absolutely. But that means making a decision. You're going to live with him or you're going to get absorbed into the world. What a bummer to be a Christian and nobody knows about it at work. Had the coolest experience today. This guy comes in, says, hey, my coworker turned me on to Jesus. And I want to come to church now. And he was all excited about his newfound faith and his wife and baby. And I was chatting with him about it. And he says, yeah, I just started the Bible, the first 7 chapters of Genesis. I said, ooh, hold on, man. We got to put you into the New Testament. He goes, well, where do I get one of those? Really? It's at the other side of the Bible. Okay? He has no clue. That's the kind of world we're living in right now. People don't even know that the Bible's in 2 parts. And what a joy to be able to tell them what the gospel message was and walk them through it and show them how the Bible works. This is what we're supposed to be about. Because we got a group of people around us that don't have a clue. And that guy's at work sharing his faith. All right? Are you? Anybody in your life that you're sharing your faith with? It's time for us to establish some non-Christian relationships so we can tell them about the God who made them, loves them, and wants to move in this world and in their lives. All right? Sounds scary to me? Make a friend. Hey, do you go to church? Yeah. Come with me. I'd like to tell you about it, but I'm clueless. Go listen to the pastor. Well, actually, he's clueless too. Let me introduce you to one of the elders, okay? That's how it works. And then in chapter 5 of Isaiah, it's so cool. Jesus talks about the parable of the vineyard. It's all right here in chapter 5. He talks about God. He has this beautiful garden. He plants in it. He builds a tower. He takes care of it. And then he does all he can. And this is how he ends up, verse 4. What more was there for me to do for my vineyard that I have not done? It's not producing anything for him. What more could I have done? And I think, wow, what more could he have done for us? You know, we had a problem with sin. He sent his son to die on the cross for us. We need his presence. Gives us the Holy Spirit. We have the Bible so that we know how he thinks and what's important to him. We have ongoing forgiveness so that we can always be close to him. What excuse are you going to have when you get to heaven? Because you can say, what more could I have done for you? 2016 might be that year where we say, you know what? I think it's time for me to take it to the next level. And he said, I expected it to produce great and to produce worthless ones. What are we producing? Okay? And then he's got a bunch of woes. The woes to the people who add on to their houses and then live alone. Isn't that the way it works? You make a big house and then you put a wall up behind a gated community so that nobody else can be around you. He wanted us to be in community. He talks about those who rise early in the morning to pursue strong drink. Woe to those who are heroes in drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink. Okay? People who like to party. Has an interesting statement. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. And do you notice how people today will use God's vocabulary but not his dictionary? They like to use the spiritual words, but they have a different meaning for them than what God does. And they have this way of convoluting spiritual things. And God's going, huh? What are you talking about? And all this has taken place. And friends, he talks about those who justify bribes. Justice up for sale. And we go, well, it's not me. Well, actually, how many times does your political party sway you to vote a certain way because there's a benefit going to be for you rather than for somebody else? Okay? I don't want to, vote that way because it's going to impact my economy. Well, how's it going to help other people? That's more important. You care about God's issues, and he's going to care about your economy. That's what he tells us. Well, let's get to the power stuff tonight, right now. Chapter 6. For those people who say, when I get to heaven, I got a few questions for God. He's going to have to answer to me. I'm like, wow, do you mind if I just move away in case the lightning bolt comes right now? And usually these are people who have been hurt by life, and if they tell you what they want to ask God, you go, wow, I think that's a raw deal. I'm sorry that touched your life. I can see why you'd be frustrated. But here's the problem. In chapter 6, in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with his train filling the temple. Seraphim stood above him. They had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their face, and 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. Okay? And he said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." You know, this is the only place in Scripture that talks about seraphim. Now, in Revelation chapter 4, they describe other unique beings with many eyes. But they're not seraphim. When you get to heaven, there's going to be different stuff. Different beings. Okay? And so Isaiah, he's having this vision. And what is he seeing? The whole earth is full of God's glory. Now, I thought I said the Assyrians were rolling through town. Some of the worst people of all time. We assume that when life's tumbling in, it's all bad, right? God's still around. He's available to call on. Remember, evil doesn't ever have the last word. And so Isaiah, he sees God, and he says, "Woe is me! I am ruined. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips." Now you have to realize this is probably the best man on earth at the time. And how does he see himself when he sees God? I'm unworthy. I'm unclean. Lots of people say, "Well, you know, I'm not that bad." Phew, not a good argument when you get to the pearly gates. Best to just say, "You know, I kind of need the help that Jesus brought through the cross." That's what you need to say. He actually curses himself. "Woe is me." And notice he doesn't blame the other. "Well, you know, if it wasn't for these other people that I have to live with that are negatively influencing me." No, he says, "Man, I'm one of them. Sinners." Remember when Peter encountered Jesus doing the miracles and he said, "Depart from me, I'm a sinful man"? That's what's taking place right here, right now. And friends, when you encounter God and you see who he is, then you see how unworthy you are. I was talking to another person this week. It's funny. He's going, "Yeah, I'm going to give my life to Christ, and he's going to help me out with my business, and he's going to make, I said, "Absolutely. He's going to do all those cool things you want him to do." Okay? And I didn't tell him. I just wanted him to get on the journey, looking to see how the Lord's going to help him out, because somewhere on the journey, he's going to be, boom, confronted with who God is. And all these things he wants from God are going to dissipate as he goes, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize who I was seeking." That's how it's going to be. Well, Isaiah, he confesses this sin. And one of the seraphim takes a burning coal and it touches his mouth. Have you ever had to cauterize something? Hopefully you have not. It's where they burn the dead tissue off and the wound is healed, the infection gone. That's what's taking place. The infection of sin gone. And notice when John the Baptist said, when Jesus comes, he's coming with wind and fire, because Jesus is cauterizing our sin. And so, notice something. What did Isaiah do to be forgiven? Well, let me get things in order, God. No, he just goes, "Wow, I'm a sinner, and you're an amazing God." That's the step into the relationship with Jesus Christ. Acknowledging your sinfulness in response to his holiness. That's the first step. And then the Lord says, "Well, who's going to go for us? The world's a mess." And he says, "Here am I, send me." This is huge. And God's not going to send you if you don't have the right perception of who he is. Okay? King Frederick II, he was an 18th century king of Germany back then, and he goes to one of the prisons. And he sees this one prisoner, and he says, "Hey, you with your head bowed down. What are you in here for?" He says, "Armed robbery." He goes, "Well, are you guilty?" He goes, "Yeah." And everybody else is going, "Man, I shouldn't be in here. I'm innocent. I'm innocent." And he goes, "Bailiff, let him out. I don't want him influencing all these innocent people." Okay? And this is cool because when you're willing to say, "Yeah, I shouldn't have done it," and you hang your head, that's when you're ready to receive forgiveness. It's when you're arguing about it wasn't my fault. I was raised in a bad neighborhood. It was my mother's fault. If you had to go through what I did, well, we have all these excuses. But if you just accept the fact that I'm a mess and I need help, Lord, you're freed. And I'm going to close things up here. I'm running out of time. Isaiah doesn't have a promising ministry. He says, listen, go tell the people, keep on listening, but you're not going to perceive. Keep on looking, but you're not going to understand. Render the hearts of this people insensitive, their ears dull, their eyes dim. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and return to be healed. Do you know that this is repeated 6 times in the Bible? 6 times. Why? Because it's a description of the result of sin. When you're lost in sin and doing your own thing, you don't perceive, you can't see it, you don't understand, you're insensitive. All right? And this is what happens. Now, God doesn't make them that way. But he's saying this is the kind of group you're going to go talking to. So if you ever run into somebody and they'd laugh at you, you're just like Isaiah. Not bad company to be in. Till you get sawed in half. Okay? And you know what's so amazing about Isaiah is we get to the end of chapter 6 and there's still hope. He just says they're a bunch of dull, self-oriented dimwits. And then he pitches out hope once again. Every time he's angry, hey, listen, I don't want to have a problem with you. I want to have a relationship with you. Let's be in relationship. And friends, I forgot we were doing communion. It's a good thing I was wheeling and dealing like this because I got to see it, okay? You had a problem with God and he fixed it right here at this table. He said, I want to have a relationship with you. You got a sin problem. My son has washed your sin away. You have unhindered access to me. Forgiveness is a never-ending second chance to be right with God. How do we mismanage it? We turn it into cheap grace. And as you like to point out, it isn't cheap. He died for that grace. And maybe that's what 2016 is about for all of us. Maybe there's some cheap grace areas. It's time for us to recognize the price that was paid. And it was paid because he loves you and wants to be close.